Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I was terrible at answering my emails throughout the process, so I apologize. I wouldn't mind seeing more cameras open so that I don't feel like I'm talking to myself, but as everyone wishes. Oh, thank you. Hi, Matt. Hi, Miriam. Hello, everyone. This is fun. Friday is a day off for us, so I'm very rarely in front of a computer on Fridays, but I don't mind this so much. So again, I'm Avital. I'm based in Tel Aviv. I'm a developer advocate at Vonage. Um, my story of developer advocacy, which I guess is what we want to hear today, I guess begins at like a really young age. um, I grew up in Miami to religious Israeli parents who, at the age of 9, gave me my first computer, which was very exciting. And at the age of 14, decided to limit my access to the internet because I was a teenager and it was inappropriate now. So I don't know, my dad put up some sort of firewall or whatever. And after a month or so, I took it down and I was discovered. And a few months later, I was discovered, and I guess I was talking on AIM with my friends, and my dad walked in, and he heard like the ding, and he was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, nothing." And he saw that I was on the internet, so he cut my LAN cable, and I was like devastated, like, how will I now talk to my friends on AIM? And then, so I walked to Radio Shack, which is the tech store down the block, and I got the little piece for connecting the LAN cable. And I borrowed a crimper from someone, and I like connected the cable to my computer. And I was surfing the web for a few months, at 3 a.m., talking to my friends and I don't know, playing video games. And nothing too horrible. And until the next time I was discovered. And this time my dad got so mad, he actually unplugged all the cables from my, massive computer, placed my computer on his shoulder and walked out of my room. And it was just like me, 14-year-old, staring at this mess of cables, like, no, my precious computer. And I think I was grounded for like a week. And then when I got my computer back, we now had Wi-Fi. Um, and that was a whole journey in trying to figure out how to hack the Wi-Fi, and exactly, Sue, how to hack the Wi-Fi and like trying to get to my neighbor's Wi-Fi, and I had to get an adapter because I had one of those old PCs that didn't have, it was a whole journey. And my dad and I like played this cat and mouse game for a couple of years till at the end of, I don't know, 10th grade, he was like, "Here's an iPod Touch, happy birthday, here's the Wi-Fi password," even though at that point, I already knew that it was Jerusalem 1 and that every time he changed the password, he incremented the number by 1. So so, so this is me as a teenager just trying to solve problems and doing a lot of Googling. So I learned at a very young age that Google is your friend. This was even before I was a developer. And because I attended this religious girls' school, no one really encouraged me to go to college. It was very like, you go to college in your local town and then you get married. And I went for a year abroad here to Israel, and my friends were like, "No, like you got to come with us to college in New York. There's no way you're staying home." And another friend who I knew was like, "Why don't you come meet my aunt?" And she failed to mention that her aunt was actually the dean of a university in New York, who was then like, "Oh, what do you like, Avital?" And she said, "Avital fixes computers." And she asked me if I want to study computer science, about which I knew nothing at the time. And I said, "Sure, that sounds fun. What do you do in computer science?" She's like, what's your favorite software?" And I think I said Photoshop. And she's like, "Well, you can build something like that." And I was like, "There's no way." But on day 1 of computer science, I called my mom and basically told her, "Mom, I think I was meant to learn this language," which at the time was Java. And I could not write Java today, but at the time I knew that computer science was just like what I was meant to be doing. And, I finished college, and after college, I was a back-end engineer in New York. Um, I also studied graphic design, so I did a lot of like fun design work on the side. And then I moved to Israel, and it was when I was here working as a full stack engineer, which is pretty much the only thing they hire for here. You have to know everything about everything to be a developer here. Um, I kind of had this moment where I was like, okay, I don't think I love writing code as much as is required for me to advance in the space. Like, I like it, but it's not something I want to do in my free time. And I'm not really, wanting to keep up with the trends and the new technologies and things like that. And it just like wasn't kind of burning for me. And when I worked for an American company based out of Seattle, and when they closed their Israeli office, I realized that it was kind of time for me to it was time to like look up and say maybe I won't go to another computer science engineering interview. Except for I had no idea what I was going to be doing. I hadn't heard of developer relations at this point. So I started going to customer success and product management interviews and software like customer success architect and all these like funny titles that I could get my hands on just to figure out like what was the role for me. And I bumped into a friend in the building of some Python interview I went to because like what are you gonna do if that's what they're offering? You gotta go. Um, and her a friend who was with her was like, "Why don't you be a developer evangelist?" I was like, "A developer what?" And I found the one company in Israel that was hiring for that role. Um, and the description said something to the effect of, you love tech, you love people, you love public speaking. And in my time in New York, I had been giving a bunch of like Jewish studies classes to my friends because I didn't know what else to do with my free time after, going out into the big bad square world. So I'd kind of gotten some experience in like speaking in front of friends and just constructing speeches and PowerPoint presentations, at all. And I see this job description and it fits everything that I've ever wanted to do. And I do everything in my power and I get the job. In that role, this was at Kaltura. I spent 2.5 years pretty much revamping the entire developer experience. Ooh, there's noise coming from somewhere. Um, what this means is, for those of you who don't know this world, so we're coming from an understanding that an API, a company with an API, a company with software that is, needs to be implemented by developers. The developer is the target audience and you're selling to developers. And it's nice that you can have conversations with, the business owners or the CTO or whatever other stakeholders there are in the company that you might want to be selling to. At the end of the day, the people using your technology are developers. And developer relations is kind of this world that comes to make that entire experience better for developers and comes to, I guess, get the attention of those developers that you want to be pulling into your platform. So, yeah, it's part marketing, it's part developer experience, it's a lot of content writing, it's a lot of just putting yourself in the shoes of developers and understanding, what is going to appeal. And in my previous role, I had worked at, on the dark side, the mobile marketing attribution world, where we were pulling tons of like click data from tons and tons of different platforms, which meant that I had to read a lot of documentation and do a ton of API integrations. And I knew what hell this could be like. So when I joined Kaltura, I was like, okay, our API is not going to be this hellish experience for developers. And from day one, I didn't know anything about the platform, so it was a perfect place to start. And I was like, okay, what is a quick start? What is a starting guide? How fast can I use Kaltura? How fast can I run a command in Kaltura? How fast can I understand what is it that I want to be doing in this platform and what I need to do and how that platform can give it to me? And it was a pretty complex API, so you really have to break that down in a lot of sections. And it was really, really cool, first of all, just knowing that I had made that impact. Like, okay, when I got here, it was pretty hard to use and understand this documentation. And now, a few months later, from, as far as I know, it's a much easier experience for developers. And it turned into a lot of like creating videos, like fun videos and blog posts, things like that, and like creative games and like API challenges, things like that. There was a lot of interpersonal relationship stuff. Like I had to work with a lot of developers to understand stuff that they'd written because I don't understand everything. And you're really in this place that's kind of similar to what I understand about product management, which is like you're not telling anyone what to do, but everyone needs to be your friend. And you're not on any development team, but all the developers are your team, or at least that's what you hope. And if you're in a bigger company doing stuff like that, a lot of the work, like there were days that I came home and I was like, I didn't do anything today except socialize. But that was actually my role. Like I had to go and be this person that people know and understand. Like everyone's like, what is a developer evangelist? What is a developer advocate? What is your role? What are you doing here? And like part of the role is just to let people know that you're actually there to mediate, you're there to advocate, you're there to kind of bring their message from the inside to the outside, and vice versa. You could be in a role where you're speaking to a lot of developer customers and being like, hey, what's going on? And then you're feeding that feedback into the pipeline, and and then QA can handle it, or anyone, or like product can handle it. So you're making a lot of impact from a lot of different areas. There were times where I was doing a lot of onboarding with once I felt like a little bit more comfortable with the platform. I was doing onboarding with companies who started to use our platform. So you're actually going to the office of someone else. This was pre-corona times. You're going to the office of someone else. You're looking at their code, you're looking at their problems, and you're being like, oh, here are 5 APIs from our API set that you could use to solve this problem you're having. And like, let's use one of our 11 SDKs in various languages to like feed it into your Ruby platform, to kind of like allow you to use this platform. So I love it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I joined Vonage a little over a year ago because I was kind of like working alone a lot, and Corona times and all that. So I was just like spending a lot of time at home, not really talking to anyone, writing documentation by myself, which could get a little bit sad and lonely. And at Vonage, I work more on the beta community. So speaking to customers here in Israel, for example, and offering them early releases in return for feedback on early releases, things like that. So I'm also getting a lot of feedback, and I'm working currently on some new APIs that we're building, and I actually have gotten involved with a lot of API design. So previously, where I joined Kaltura, the API was already done. Now I get to have kind of like a say in the naming and how we structure things, and like, is available versus availability. Like, how do you decide how to name that? What will developers understand from that? Like, it's funny how much you could talk about these things when you put yourself in the shoes of a developer and say, like, if someone who doesn't understand this platform wants to use it, what does this mean to them? And like, it's really, really tiny stuff, but when you get into it and you really like consider the fact that you're making this direct impact on people who are using the platform, and you're making them have a good day and not a bad day, like that I think is the most beautiful part of all of this. And yeah, that's been my journey. And I like just every day is a new way to express myself, to be creative. I love writing speeches. That's what I'm doing when we can get on stages and travel the world. I don't know if you've seen my bio. I talk a lot about storytelling and just turning tech topics into stories. That's probably one of my biggest passions. I don't really get to use them much unless I'm helping people write speeches or writing speeches myself. But I think that there's a huge power just in our ability to take things that could be mundane and dry and turn them into stories and experiences. And that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I hope that still isn't your dad's password now, because now we all know it.
I saw that. I think it's some version of my name, honestly. It's always like all of my various nicknames.
Yeah. Oh no, thank you so much for that. And it's a really, really wonderful backstory that you have. If anyone's got any questions, please do drop them in the chat, because we have got a bit of time still. So yeah, if you've got any questions, drop them in, and yeah, we'll give it a few minutes, because it often takes a bit of time. One thing I will share whilst we're waiting is if you want to play around with the Vonage API, there is a tutorial on our website now that's send yourself an SMS with the Vonage API. And so, okay, cool. Questions are coming in.
I see that.
Do you find yourself having to be comfortable with all languages your API supports?
That is a very, very, very good question. Yes, the answer is yes. Less so now. When I was at Kaltura, like I said, we had client libraries in 11 languages. And first of all, I was writing samples in like 6 languages, like, the top ones. And I also would get a lot of code samples from customers having issues. So the answer is yes, but you're not doing anything particularly complex. And when you're just making API calls or you're, creating variables, like surface stuff like that is not too complicated to do in like 6 different languages. So I would say that because Kaltura's API was written in PHP, I got really comfortable in PHP. Today, because most of Vonage stuff is front end, I'm getting a lot better at JavaScript. I haven't really done a lot of front end experience previously. And my like go-to language for writing quick scripts or like, sending myself an SMS, things like that, it's always Python. So yes, but I wouldn't let that daunt you, and I wouldn't let you like scare you away from, an API that might have a lot of, from customers that have a lot of languages or from an API with a lot of language SDKs, because like, first of all, there's always samples, there's always things you can draw from, you can always Google these things. You're not writing these like really complex operations or like classes or entire infrastructures in these languages. You're writing really quick scripts with them. So as someone who I don't consider myself to be an excellent developer, and like I made it through. So it's all right. It makes you feel like how do you say, jack of all trades.
Yeah. Another question. Is there any difference between developer advocacy and developer relations?
You'll find a lot of answers on this and a lot of talks on this, and I'm sure like the grand Devrel con or developer relations, I don't know, whoever they are, the company, could give you a good answer on that. I think developer relations is all inclusive. It's it's the it's everything that falls under the umbrella of understanding that there needs to be a world that caters to developers. So people will put community management under there, and you know evangelism, advocacy, beta community. Anytime where you're working with developers, community management often centers around writing blog posts and engaging with the community and running events, which is a huge, huge part of developer relations. Then you've got under that like developer experience, developer platform. Every company calls it different. It's very new. It's a new space. It's like 10 years old, right? So and like I'm sure that in Israel things mean something different than they do in San Francisco. So I see developer relations as just like this overarching world. Um, the title won't be developer relations. The title at a given company would be like developer advocacy or community management or developer experience. Um, so that's my answer to the question. You could find different answers if you search that.
Thank you so much. I have a question. For people who have now listened to this talk and gone, oh, community events and coding sounds really exciting, and they've maybe just started their coding career, what advice would you have for those people who now think that this is something that they, potentially want to get into?
I'm glad you asked this. Because I have coffee with a lot of people, like developers, who ask me that question. The most important, I think, the most important asset or skill to have as a developer relations person is 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 publicity, is being out there, is having a voice, being able to speak, being able to write, being able to get your opinions out and your work out, being having public code. Maybe it's the smallest code ever, but it's on your GitHub and you've written something about it. Maybe you've written answers on Stack Overflow, put comments on people's blog posts, share things that you've done. Interviewers will oftentimes look at your Twitter. I know that's daunting because like my Twitter's not that great either. Do you have any talks that you've recorded and put on YouTube? Like, if I was hiring a developer advocate, evangelist, community manager, whatever, I would Google them first. I always look for speeches people have given. I always look for blog posts written by people. That's kind of, I think, so if you don't have anything out there, I recommend, and you are learning how to code, I recommend writing 1 or 2 like mini applications. Maybe it's a solution to like a little problem, and just writing something about it and sharing it with your friends and trying to get them to like comment on it or whatever, putting it on different platforms. Maybe you want to write in dev, um, just like putting your name out there and making sure that you're available so that people can see your work and that you know how to teach, because the number one skill here is to be able to teach.
Perfect answer. That's yeah, really good. And my other question is, what's the interview process like? Because I guess, like you mentioned, like a big part of it is events, and so yeah, what's a typical interview process like when applying for a job like this?
Like I said, if you've had your name on any events, that's amazing. Most interview processes will be about taking something in the platform. My interview process at Kaltura, I had to teach, I had to make a video of myself teaching how to make a mobile app using the Kaltura video player. I didn't know anything about mobile development, so this was a fun weekend. Um, but I really wanted that role, so like nothing was going to stand in my way. Um, so and so I had to do that. So I had to basically build this app and then record myself building this app. And then the second part of my assignment was to find issues with the API documentation and suggest fixes. Yeah, it's it's a lot. It's a lot. Developers oftentimes get stuff like this, like look at this part of our code and make a pull request on something that you would change. So it's a very similar idea. It requires like being proactive, not just about like stuff being thrown at you, rather looking at something and saying like, if I wanted to understand this, where would there be a gap in my understanding? I've also seen friends who have interviews where they have to give a presentation on something specific. So they'll look at the company's one specific part of the product and they have to give like a presentation to the interviewers with a PowerPoint on like how they would present this at a conference. So it comes down to like a lot of like presentation work, teaching work. Like, how would you instruct other people how to do or use this thing? And when it comes to events, like no one's ever tested me on how I would run an event before. They usually just ask me like, tell me about events that you've run.
That's yeah. So for anyone thinking of maybe going into this area, there's your answers. Are there any other questions? We'll give it like another minute or so, and if no one's got any other questions, we can wrap up. I just dropped a link to your Twitter, Avital. Yeah, I'll give it a minute.
No, I don't run anything useful there. I know, I don't practice what I preach.
Oh, we've got questions coming in. Okay, how do Devrels work with community managers at Vonage?
So it's a loaded question because there's been a lot of restructuring to developer advocacy, developer experience roles at Vonage, but I used to be on the community team. Today I'm like based on the Israel API team. And when I was, there was like the platform and experience people, and then there was the people responsible for like the blog and the podcast, and then there was the community team, and we were responsible for events and like community engagement. So there was always kind of like touching base once a week, and then what's like essentially the way that they need to work together is like, I mean, there's like the whole question of budgeting, right? And then there's like maybe sponsoring events. So you need to figure out, okay, what tier of sponsorship do we want to do? And then if we choose a tier where like we would get a demo or we would get to do a workshop or we would get to do something, then that would then turn to like the developer advocates and would be like, oh, does anyone here want to give a demo at this event that we're sponsoring? Stuff like that. So it's just about like, what are we running? What kind of stuff needs to happen? Everyone's got their roles in that. Maybe we need to write a blog post before or about this event. So then the person, like, people on the blog post team would be doing that. So at a bigger company, you have this ability to have like 3 community managers and like 20 developer advocates and like the 10 content writers. In smaller companies, that might be all you. That might be just like one person. That was me at Kaltura. It's everything. And then you're kind of working with yourself and balance, just like an entire balancing act of figuring out like, what am I capable of doing right now? What's priority? What does my community need right now? If I'm working in an event, who can I pull in from outside teams to kind of help me? I don't know if this is answering your question, um, but yeah, it really depends on the company you go to. You could be like a one man woman show for sure. Or you could be lucky enough to work at a place like Microsoft who has like, I don't know, 400 developer advocates. I made up that number, but they have a lot of them. So then like everyone's got their very specific role and region and it's really nice. And then you kind of get to work together to have different assets come from different places and like run things really smoothly. I don't know if that was the answer you were looking for, Suze. Um, Tell me if you want me to elaborate a little bit more. In the meantime, do I think this would be the right job for an autistic person? I think that definitely like different aspects of the role could. I think there's like a huge social aspect to it that's incredible. Um, like I said, this role or this space can be a lot of things. And I think there's room for any sort of person in this role. I think you can skip college entirely. You can have a different background and you could find your space in, is it like running events? Is it being there for customers who need help? Is it finding content to write? Like, I really think that um, if you're able to frame your skills correctly, there could be room for pretty much anyone. Um, Jill K asked about the text storytelling. Yeah, that's what I was gonna offer if nobody else asks any more questions. Um, so the way so I've got this whole like thing that I built around it. Basically during lockdown, I was like, okay, I can't give any speeches, but maybe I can help other people learn how to give speeches. And one thing that I find really interesting about this role for non-technical people or people who didn't study or who didn't write code at any point, is that you're able to have like an outside perspective, which is why I'm saying this role can really be for anyone. You're able to have an outside perspective on concepts in tech, on code, on solutions in tech, on an API, and you're able to help developers kind of like shape their focus or shape what they're expressing in a way that is more tangible for people who are outside of the story. So what I'm saying is sometimes developers who are writing code, for example, have a hard time stepping outside of that because it's like an artist, if you're inside a painting, it's very hard to like step away and look at it and kind of see like, oh, this might look different to an eye that hasn't been staring at it for the past 2 months. And my whole like framing around the text storytelling is like, okay, if I want to give a presentation around a solution in tech, around a bug that I solved, around a new concept, around a product, around an API, I need to be able to step out of that and ask myself questions like, why did I write this? What was the problem I was trying to solve? What was there before I did this thing? Who would be the target audience for this thing? What are they looking to gain? And most importantly, what value can I give them? You know, you find that like if you're writing a speech, you're writing a presentation, you want to give a talk at a meetup, you start writing the slides and you're right away like really deep into this thing. And then you might present it to someone and they're like, you know, the title seemed nice, but like what are you trying to tell me here? And if you are able to back out, and this is something that you can also help developers if you're like in more of a developer relations world, be able to back out and say like, wait, what are you doing for the audience? What value are you providing to the audience? Why would they come to your talk? Why would they read your blog post? What problem could you give them and then solve for them? And it's all about framing that context. It's all about framing that context to say, imagine this scenario that you're in. Okay. You know, you're a developer, take Kaltura, for example. You're a developer, you're writing this app. You want to add the ability for, you're writing like a cooking app or a social chef app. I don't know, call it whatever you will. And you want to give people, it's like Instagram for food, right? And you want to give people the ability to add videos of their food that they're cooking. So what you're going to need is a video API. And what you're going to do as a developer, because no one's told you which video API to add, you're going to Google video APIs, right? And you are going to come upon different APIs. You're going to find one that whose documentation you couldn't even find, and you're going to find one that only has, you know, curl commands, and that's going to get kind of messy. And if you don't find like for every API you find that doesn't exactly like appeal to how quickly you want to finish this task, you're just going to, you know, close that tab in Google and not give this company your business. And if you're turning to a company and saying like, don't you want the business of those developers who um, either, you know, you could turn to a company and say, don't you want their business? You could turn to a developer and be like, don't you want developers to want to use your platform? What you need to do is kind of like really put them in that pain point and say, the pain point here is that developers aren't able to use this, that this is impossible to use, that, you know, it's taking too long to upload the video, that the video is then grainy. I don't know, every single pain point that you could find to really like get to your audience and say, what we're doing right now isn't working, but I'll offer you a solution. So that's what I mean by text storytelling. And then from there, I like to kind of help people figure out like what are other solutions you can offer to your audience, because maybe your audience won't be able to use your exact solution. Maybe if you're talking to them about how to generate, you know, documentation, maybe just offer out of the box solutions like Open API does something like that. You know, like it's just about putting yourself in the shoes of the audience, just like I said, putting yourself in the shoes of the developer and saying like what would make sense to them, what would give them the most value, how do they leave your talk feeling like they've received something, and what is the most important thing that you want them to remember, because your audience is not going to remember everything you say. So how do you give them like a nice bite-sized sandwich um, that they're going to be able to take home and remember? And I always say that having a strong opening and a strong closing that are related to each other, meaning you want to close the circle at the end, will always help the audience kind of remember what you said in the middle. So those are my tips. I have a lot more. I'm working on a website, and then all this stuff will be publicly available. Thank you, Miriam. And yeah, I can talk forever about this, but you can ask specific questions if you want to know more. Other tips that I offer when presenting a speech is um, pacing your, or I guess controlling the speed of your talking. So if I slow down, you know that I might say something important. But if I'm kind of telling a story and it's less important, and maybe these details aren't so important, I could speed it up, because the brain, even more so now during what we've gone through in the last year and a half, you have like zero attention span at this point. So if I talk at the same speed the entire time, your brain is just going to tune me out. If I slow down, if I pause, you're going to look up and listen. So there's like the storytelling, and then there's the presenting of the story, and it's all about understanding that your audience doesn't really want to pay attention to you. Like they just can't help it. They like you, they want to be with you, but their brain is like, this person's talking for way too long and I don't really want to listen anymore. So what you need to do is be like as attractive, as exciting, I don't mean like visually, as exciting, you know, as like, I call them like heartbeats. Every time you change your pace, you change the monotony of your talk. you ask a question to your audience like, has this ever happened to you? Or you can always talk about like now on Zoom and things like that, be like, I know you're looking at another tab right now, but look at me for a second. Just like gimmicky stuff, um, because it's hard to pay attention and you want to know that you're providing as much value as you can to your audience. And that's what it comes down to. And that's what Devrel comes down to. And just this entire world that we're in, like, we are here for the people, we are here for the developers. What are we giving to them? Do you have a strong yes, no. The question from Suze is, do you have to have a strong personal brand to be a Devrel? Um, it helps. Also, companies are more likely to hire you if they know that people will see their company on your, like, that all of their following will see their company on that person's Twitter. Um, I don't think you have to. Uh, like, I don't, and I've been doing quite well. It really depends. I'm sure bigger companies like, you know, ones that want community managers specifically who have a big following will look for that. If you just want to offer a great developer experience, I don't think it's important. It's really about the role. And you could look right now, I don't know what you're using for jobs in the UK. Here we use LinkedIn a lot. I oftentimes just like out of curiosity look at all of the roles for developer advocacy in Israel, and they each have such different requirements. And some of them I look at and I would say like I would never take this role. And some of them I look at and say, hey, this sounds like fun. This is kind of what I'm doing right now. This could be a fit for me. So, like I said, it's kind of like a really cool undefined world. You might see requirements that say must have a strong following on Twitter. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that existed. Some people don't care at all. I mean, some companies don't care at all. So it's about what makes you comfortable. If you want to be Twitter famous, then being a developer advocate is a really good way to go, especially if you can go to events and then, you're following people and they're following you and you're sharing their talk and they're sharing your talk and then you write blog posts and they share that. The more value you can offer is what is going to get like, more of a following. Um, I had like 5 followers until I gave a talk at Devrel Con, which just went really well, and a bunch of people shared it, and that kind of what grew the following for me. So it's really just about being out there, and if you want to be that kind of persona, it's hard. It's like, some people are like, I have to post to Twitter once a day because that's what's going to make you have more followers. It's like, you have to decide if it's a priority for you. But it is a very good way to get there because you're just like you're putting things out there, like I said, which is a big part of the role. Yeah, everyone wants to be famous. It's a really good way to, but like honestly, when we were traveling and going to conferences and like people were inviting me to different parts of the world, that it was pretty. It's like a really cool aspect of the role if you're ready for it emotionally. It's really special, and you don't just feel like it's all like you don't feel like a fake celebrity for lack of better words because you're like, oh, I'm going to teach things, like I'm gonna go to another country to like make an impact on the 600 people in the audience. Like that's pretty cool. And there's something really special about it. And honestly, remote events could be really, really fun as well. I did a bunch of them last year. Um, a lot of people come because they can and from different parts of the world. And that's another great way to have people get to know you. So it's really just about what you want and what you think fits you and your personality. Thank you so much. This is fun. Thanks for inviting me. To anyone here, feel free to find me. I'm probably more available on LinkedIn than Twitter. If you have any questions, if you want to write a speech and you're looking to start, I'm really happy to help with all of those things. If you want to work for Vonage, I don't think we have developer advocacy roles right now. I'm sure we have other ones. Feel free, really. I'm available. And have a great weekend, everyone.